Good morning, people. Happy New Year. This is the first episode of the let's start again. I forgot how I call
It's okay. You can cut it later. Just keep rolling.
All right. Good morning, people. Happy New Year. This is the first episode of the software breakthroughs for the 21st century. And I'm very excited today. We have my friend Anton. Anton is a very talented software guy. And full disclosure, Anton and I worked together on a project, and I immensely enjoyed working with him and learned a lot from Anton. So today, Anton is going to give us his unique perspective of many things we're talking about regarding software in the 21st century. I especially appreciated, Anton, your work that you and I did together in starting the agile community of practice at the project we worked on. That was a brilliant contribution. I really appreciate that. And I know you have really good head for agile practices. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How do you see the future of your profession? And anything else you want to share? Over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for introducing, and honored to be a guest on the show. I've seen some of the episodes of your previous engagements, previous topics that you were talking. It's a major hit, and I'm really honored to be a guest here. And just like you, I really enjoyed the time that we spent together, the breakthrough that we had. At the time, I sort of felt like a revolutionary, and to me, the whole practice of the community of practice resonated quite well. It was it sort of was built out of a little bit of a frustration of the authorities, and therefore forming something that is not official. And in many cases, it was actually against the grain, right? Definitely gave me some enthusiasm about it, and bringing people, seeing how people are talking when they are not sort of approved to talk, right? Nobody sent them there. And also it was very refreshing to see the authorities coming in every now and then. I was like, what the hell are you doing? Oh, you have to hold it down, or you have to get the approval to start even talking about stuff, thinking police and that. And as a matter of fact, I hear and feel it in many projects that I've worked since. The pattern seems to be similar, and now rather than being a revolutionary, I'm becoming more of a listener. Maybe it's the age and maturity, but rather than being frustrated and pushing through, which wastes a lot of energy, I'm learning, I'm listening, and in that way, not with a bad meaning of the word, but I'm exploiting it. And you're exploiting it, you see what are the weaknesses, you see what are the strengths, and you use both in order to move forward, build the relationship. So from my end, that's the approach that I've been using lately. I've also noticed that the reason why people are afraid to start something and they're waiting for the approvals, and they're seeking for approvals, and in some cases maybe they're hoping for not approving certain engagements. That's in this case, we don't have to do it back to water cooler chats. It's the lack of responsibility. They don't want to take the responsibility. They don't want to take accountability, right? So if somebody approves it, all of a sudden accountability, responsibility off their shoulders, it's on somebody else, and the outcome of it, no longer depends on me. If it fails, well, it's because Mr. Manager told us so. It's his stupid idea, so not my problem. And the reason why, for example, I like the agile methodology, and it's not just the software development. Well, we all know that it came from the actual manufacturing rather than software development. I use it everywhere. Like I always use the example of the agile cooking, right? You open it, you have some idea in your mind based on what you remember you have in the fridge and in your pantry. You start making it and you adjust it as you go. you fail, what would you rather do? Would you rather measure the amount of salt and amount of spices and dump it into a pot, or would you just add a little bit and try it? The continuous improvement. As a matter of fact, another story came into my mind. As I was learning photography, and about 5-6 years ago, I got into the studio photography, studio fashion, portraiture. I came across this famous commercial photographer, Joel Grimes, and he had several short videos on YouTube. He had some master classes that I pirated, and one day he shares a story how he sets up his lights. He's like, I don't know what the settings are. I just come, I set up approximately this, approximately that, take one shot, and then I can adjust it. And he's like, it's much quicker than using a light meter and dial by numbers, because you'll have to adjust it anyway. But what really hit me, what really sort of gave me the weight in his methodology, is the fact that this photographer is colorblind. Now that could be a disaster. Like, he shoots commercials for Nikes, he shoots commercials for Speedos, and he's colorblind.
Wow. Incredible. Wow.
So it's the approach, right? It's how you take the accountability, you take responsibility, and
own it.
Don't think too much about it. And ownership. Yeah, you associate with him.
No, that's really, thank you for this. Really searing insight, and it speaks volumes. So that's the thing. You see, when I talk about software creation, I like to call it software creation, because it combines engineering and craft and art and science, blah, blah, blah. But we are creating something, right? And, we did not have, like, last major breakthrough in this profession was 25 years ago, with extreme programming and test-driven development. And since then, it's been just like coasting and, a routine, same old. And that's why I'm hoping that you will pick up once you get, we talked about where we're at the moment, and rejoin the forces in full swing, because we need people such as yourself with a lot of talent and a lot of unique perspective. That's what's needed now, is a fresh, unique perspective. Not somebody like myself. I've been doing this for 30 years, and things harden in your brain and you think this is how, but you need fresh perspective. You need people, younger people, coming in and saying, all right, this is by now has been ossified and hardened, and we got to find a better way, because there is a better way, right? Mm-hmm. And for example, why do we need this breakthrough? Somebody said, why do we need it? In my opinion, when I look at today's successful leaders on the market, none of them are doing projects anymore. Projects are history. People are only doing experiments. That's all they're doing. And how many cluster organizations afraid of even think about experiments and just have this safe sandbox where you're doing your projects and your paperwork, and it really doesn't go anywhere. So I don't know if you agree with me, but I think we need to switch to thrive on the market. We need to switch our focus away from projects, that's history, jump headfirst into experimenting and learning. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely. The one thing that's, as you talk about it, one thing comes into mind is the question why. And the question why, not about the experimenting, but rather why on any statement, right? Any statement you bring. For example, write a software. Why? What's the purpose of it, right? And in my opinion, because as you were talking, I was sort of thinking and reliving, not just being a sort of participant in a software creation, but also being a consumer of the software. You get to the point where there is an abundance of same tools, right? Essentially the tool that does the exactly same job. Like look, open the app store on the phone and look for the task management software. There is hundreds and hundreds, right? And yet people are still creating more and more. So the question is, why are they creating more, right? Is it something that they just want to become trendy? Sometimes it could be fresh developers that want to experiment, or if they are trying to solve the real problem. And there is no right answer to it. I think the question itself and asking the question is more important than finding an answer. So the same thing with the breakthrough, right? Like, what is the purpose of the breakthrough? And I think in each individual case, it could be different. And, even day after day, it could be different. So when you say we need to, like, the way that leaders are, focusing on experimentation rather than the projects, that essentially is the approach where you're no longer solving a problem, but you are actually looking for a problem, right? Because what is the reason, for example, moving to the cloud, right? For any organization that has a data center, you buy new racks of equipment. There is new and more optimized hardware coming here and there. You have full control over it. What's the point of moving to the cloud, right? So you find the problem and then you find a solution for it. So the same thing with the software creation. What is it, the problem that we're trying to solve? Same thing with finding a breakthrough. What is it, the problem we're trying to solve? And in order to answer to that question, you need to find the problem. Experimentation is the perfect way. Even if it's just, sharpening the skills.
Yeah, because I think the problem we are trying to solve is thriving on the market. Without experimentation, you cannot thrive. You either fall by the wayside or you turn into a moronic, crusty monolith that is just like dysfunctional. And even though it's flush with money and doesn't know what to do with money, it's not thriving. It's just like, vegetating. Like all these too big to fail organizations. They don't do anything, just vegetate. The money keeps pouring in because everything's corrupt. But it's just money. But that nothing else works. It's just the money keeps pouring in and everything's paralyzed. Therefore, no one is thriving. They just kind of Death Star, just consuming smaller businesses and turning them into dead flesh, right? And it's destroying the planet, polluting, clogging the oceans. And I don't see that being something we are eager to continue doing because we're cutting the branch that we sit on, right? So experimenting means we want to get out of that death march and want to turn the ship around and start thriving, enjoying what we do, not harming anything, and yet being very, very, doing intelligent things. And it's been demonstrated you cannot do that with the project-centric mind. When you have your projects and, that's just death march, right? And so just to wrap it up, I think we need breakthroughs in software to enable that experimentation, because right now the way we're working is the opposite. It is discouraging experimentation and punishing, and everything is so idiotic in my mind, counterproductive.
Well, in order to experiment, you need to budget for the non-productive work. Meaning, right, like from the business, from the finance, this is where they see productive. You're closing a story to release a feature. We don't care what the feature is. We don't care what it's used. It's the PVI, right? It's the item in our backlog, and then we need to close it. But nobody cares what's in it. Why are we doing this? What is the sort of emotional connection to it? There is one project that I'm working on right now. I'm trying to influence the development team to account 25% of their daily time on tech debt reduction. And that is before even creating a tech debt. Obviously lots of people are saying, well, there is this formula on how to calculate the tech debt. Like, what is considered tech debt? how can we avoid creating a tech debt in the first place? And to the point that some argue that is 25% the right number, or is it should be 5 according to this book, it should be 10 according to that, to that book. In my view, when you take a huge portion of your focus, of your sort of scarce potential, right? So the time, right? You have 40 hours a week, and you say 10 hours we're going to budget for tech debt reduction. It's a significant number of hours that you can actually not just do tech reduction. Maybe you can, do a team building activity because they want to, but it's something that is like, you know what, I'm not spending it on feature development. So looking at the 25% dedication of time for something is essentially removing it from a rat race. And that is the time where it could be experimentation can happen as well. If we can push the envelope to 25% on tech reduction, 25% on the test automation, 25% on innovation, and then we have only 25% on creating new stuff, I think that's, it may be a little bit drastic, but this is the door and the window of, first of all, changing people's mentality to remove themselves from the rat race. And it actually creates the potential where we can actually think about it. It's not just 1 hour feature Fridays where you can develop something in a COP, or 2 hours a sprint. It needs to be the focus on. And just like you were telling the story about the guy who was recovering drowned bodies, he was focusing on that. So until we focus on experimentation and remove the focus from closing stories and building new features that nobody freaking cares about except for the product owners, which are typically project managers, yeah. I don't think that we can have a breakthrough in there.
Yeah, no,
within the organization spectrum, right? Like if we go outside into community, yeah, it's a different story.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I even think that what you charted here is like maybe a growth, whatever proposed trajectory, how you want to get there. But in reality, I think it should be just 100% experiment, nothing else. Not like 25%. Just either you're experimenting or you're not. There's nothing else that matters now. That this is the thing, and that's why it's such a harsh message for people who are completely allergic to even mentioning the word experiment, to now start thinking about, oh, we're doing experimenting. It's just like a huge gap, right? But that breakthrough, I think, needs to happen. And one of the road or impediments is the way we're currently doing software creation is completely ass backwards, completely 100% wrong, 100% wrong-headed, right? So that needs to change, I think, because now, even though if you have, and sometimes you meet those leaders or people at executive level who have good approach, and I talk to them, and then they hit the pea in this cup crew, the ivory tower. And these are so retro. These people are so 19th century, regimented, and like talk to the hand, IT, pee in this cup. Don't call us, we'll call you. We'll get back to you. That's not going to work. So I meet those people who have good ideas and good orientation, and now the situation is debilitated by the old-fashioned IT practices, where everything's paranoia, everything is locked down, like nobody touches anything. Experimentation, get out of here.
So Alex, let me ask you this question, actually. Just something hit me. So could it be that the software development, right, because that's what it was, now we're trying to introduce the creation instead, was it because there was a revolution that happened maybe, a couple of times, and that's why you saw those jumps, and now we are maybe in the evolution state, and the evolution state, just like the typical human evolution theory, it still has the milestones, right? It still kind of goes evolution, evolution, and then something comes up. Anything that was not solving the purpose drops off. So in the long term, it looks like there was a revolutionary event. But if you look at each of the individual thing, it's actually even evolutionary. So same thing with those leaders. In order to get away from this thing, a time needs to go by, some sort of evolution needs to happen, and maybe evolve from 5 to 10 to 25 to 100% dedication to experimentation. Because yes, completely cutting and saying we are now experimenting, it's going to freak everybody out.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, I read that, for example, the invention of Gutenberg printing press was a revolution, but apparently that moment introduced some chaos that lasted for like a few generations.
Mm-hmm.
There was this period where things were just not resolved until eventually everything settled down, and then we started spreading literacy through mass production of printed material. We know the rest, but it didn't happen overnight. Just because we had the printing press and now we had the means to mass produce written content and also written print images, did not overnight get everybody up and say, yeah, okay, now life is going to get better. Apparently it took a long time, which is a bit worrisome, right? A bit concerning. So maybe we're in this stage now where the new printing press was invented, and now we are all running around like headless chicken. Like, what do we do with this? Right? We still have people who are manually copying manuscripts and doing all the low-level manual work, and they're like, no, the press will never replace us, blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
Eventually they will disappear and nobody will ever mention them again, but for now they are still the incumbents.
Or they might still exist, but it will be something that you do not to solve any problem, but just for fun.
Yeah.
How many people right now, for example, the North American writing, like a handwriting, and I became hand typing at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now we see actually not necessarily a boom, but there is an interest in calligraphy. There's more interest in the calligraphy with those people who will learn how to print.
But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about copying. Calligraphy is great, but if you have a book that I would like to read, and Anton, can you make a copy for me? You're not going to hand copy, right? Just because you like to calligraphy, you're going to find more.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, so basically, what would I like to discuss now, if you don't mind, is something I call the representation of thought. So we have thoughts and we find ways to represent them. For example, written text is one way there are still people in this world who don't know how to read and write. So they don't know how to represent their thoughts or consume represented thoughts from a piece of paper. And then there's another way, for example, we can represent some data, which is in tabular format. We can create columns and rows and put some values. And now the thought behind that was represented in a consumable way that you and I can read and get, oh yeah, okay. On the other hand, there is a way to represent our physical environment by creating a map. And people were into map creation for a long time, to go and measure the distance from this tree to that tree and blah, blah, the river. And now you go back and you kind of draw the map. And this is your territory now. Okay, so this is my city, right? Then at one point, it was, I think, back in the 18th century, I forgot exactly when, somebody, and I apologize, I forgot the name of the scientist, looked at the tabular data, looked at the map and said, oh, why don't we combine them? And the graph was invented. So instead of having your data in tabular format, you have the X and Y axis and you plot, and now you can, at a glance, you can understand the thought behind it. So now it's a superior, one could argue that this is a superior way to represent your thought. Instead of having in tabular format, you draw a map of your thought. Another example of thought representation is Roman numerals. So representing numbers as Romans did. That comes with some limitations. For example, Allegedly, you cannot do arithmetic using Roman numerals. You need access to abacus. Then Arabic numerals come along, representing the same thing differently. Now all of a sudden you can do arithmetic. So superior, right? And on and on. We see that throughout the history, people invent new ways of representing their thought, which much more powerful. You know, the Bohr model of Adam and all these things. So what is needed in software is a new way to represent our thoughts. This current way is very, very, very primitive, clunky, and it's just like not good. And by that, I mean, we represent thoughts on how the machines will work using text. And text is a terrible way to represent, because see, the problem in software, if you're creating software, you're using text, you're using code as text. And you go into the editor and you make some change, and then nothing happens. You made a change, you have no idea whether this broke something or didn't break something. This is the stupidest way to work. When you work on anything else, like you're saying photography, you value immediate feedback. You make a change, immediately you know if it works or doesn't work. Or cooking, you add more salt, oh crap, or not enough. You need this constant feeding back. Your every action should be immediately giving you the information. Did I break something? Am I going in the right direction? In software, no. I can go in all day long and make all kinds of changes and write all kinds of text. I have nothing. I have no idea what I did, right? So that is a huge handicap, I think. And we need a breakthrough. We need to change that. So long as we continue with code as text, we're going to be hobbling like that and being really behind all the other phenomenal experiments and advancements that people sending things to Mars and all these things. But in software, it's so pedestrian. And we need to start thinking in the opposite direction, I think. And that's why we need people like you, talented people with open mind, with ability to quickly connect disparate things that nobody would ever think of connecting. That's what's needed. That's my whole point of this entire endeavor. How can we get people together and start thinking in that direction? I don't know if what I said makes sense or I managed to completely mess you up.
No, it totally does, and very well put, very beautifully said. My question would be this: first of all, what is a problem that we're trying to solve, right? So the same thing with when we are when you were talking the representation of thought. It was, although it solved the problem, right? Like for example, how you mentioned about the Roman numerals, the arithmetic wasn't possible. Well, it's not that somebody invented a new system and it happens that that system fits the purpose of arithmetics. It's more likely that the arithmetics or lack of ability to do arithmetics was the problem. And therefore, there was an experimentation. What can be used? Oh, here it is. Here's the system. Boom, it works, right? So in my opinion, it's the same thing with code. One of the example, and I know that, like I've heard there are some experimentation happening about that. Right now, we are at the point where compute is so cheap, right? Compared to, for example, 60, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago. Right now, computing is so cheap. Therefore, there's this huge boom of AI and ML and all that stuff, right? The blockchains and stuff. It is because you don't want to, there is no, so to speak, waste of compute resources. If you compute and, it crunch through numbers million times a second, it's fine. So similar to that thought, back in the days, the way that we were programming, we had punch cards. So we had a problem that we wanted to solve, right? Then we form a problem definition from it in English, right? Or any other language. So you translate thoughts or experiences or maybe even emotions into language, right? Spoken language. Then from there, you translate it to more primitive level, which becomes an algorithm. Then from there, you translate it to even more primitive thing of programming language. And from there, you translate it at the very basics, ones and zeros, you go create a punch card, you feed it into machine, and now machine does that primitive work. So from there we evolve, and now people started writing language, like a programming language, and machines can translate it to ones and zeros. So in my opinion, the next breakthrough would happen when the machines can translate from spoken language to, so the coding doesn't even have to happen. Your coding is going to be a statement, a language statement, and that's what's going to open up. It's going to be more of a global phenomenon, because right now you have to know English in order to code. I always this is my favorite question on any interview. What is your favorite language? What is your favorite programming language? And I always answer, half jokingly, it's English. And the reason for that is, when I was learning programming back in school, in high school actually, we were using Turbo Pascal 5.5 then 6. And I remember I had to memorize what is the difference between print L versus print S. And print L or print F. I really had to hard to memorize what's the difference between F and L. And once I realized that it is an English statement, print file or print line, boom, it was a click. Now it makes sense. I don't have to memorize it anymore. I associate. So the same thing when a non-English speaking person writes code, they have to hard memorize without understanding what these things are. Once we have machines that interpret or translate even, transcode or whatever the term could be, and people's spoken phrases into code, and then into zeros and ones, or maybe straight into zeros and ones. This is going to be the next revolution, right? I know that there are some experimentation happening about it, very, very primitive. And right now I'm going to go into even more futuristic sort of thought experimentation. You know that we still haven't captured the methods that the information is being transported, right? We know how electricity transports, right? We can have wires, we can have satellites, but that's not information. We translate information into electricity, into magnetic, electromagnetic signals, and then we transport it. But we haven't got, we don't have sensors that can sense different types of energy. We take an energy and then we translate it, and then we know what that is. So it's somewhat connected. I would imagine that when we develop these sensors that sense things, all of a sudden everything below can now be outsourced to machines. Because right now we're still holding on to these things. The machines can do it, but we as humans, we've decided we still want to do it. And as a matter of fact, like the programming ways, there are different methodologies and that, but ultimately it's exactly the same thing as it was after punch cards. Right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's the experimentation where it's going to be really interesting, because then you can change just one word in spoken thing, and it's gonna make sure that there is a trickle effect of events that happens under it, and many different things changes. So it's no longer we're changing one thing here and one thing there, and the symbiosis, sort of disappears. Let computers do their thing. So actually, sorry, this is a really long thought.
Good.
I had another theory that as I was going into the self development. Human bodies, according to some of the thought leaders, we have different levels of a human body, right? We have a physical body, that's our organs, that's then we have a feeling body, that's our sensory. Then we have an emotional body, that's our thoughts. And then we have a higher body, which could be our connection to the purpose and whatnot, right? And then there is an even higher astral body. So without going too far out, how did human develop using like in the concept of each of those bodies, right? With a physical body is skill, right? If we went from, banging something with a rock to creating something, now we created a computer, like a very primitive computer, arrow, for example. So rather than punching, a lion, beating a lion and fighting them, we have something that can fulfill that purpose. And then we develop and develop and develop. Now we have robots that actually create robots, right? Car manufacturing is a perfect example. The car is a robot and the robot is building robot. So now when the next level, that's the intellect, the thought. So the thought has been developing, but it's been developing for way less than that, right? And as a matter of fact, the Industrial Revolution, for a second, I'm not, a historian to really understand what was the difference, but that's essentially a symptom of our thought development. So now we sort of even start outsourcing thought. We're in the very early stages of ML AI. That's exactly that. We outsource thought. So now computers can actually make decisions based on whatever they get, and then they can tell other computers to build something, they build something. The next evolution process that we are actually right now living in is that feelings and emotions revolution. If you look at the way that the information is being shared on the mass level, be it social media, the mass media, even in the day-to-day interaction between people, more and more accent is being made on how you make somebody feel, rather than what is information that you are transcribing. There is a lot of people that say a lot. There is zero informational value in it, but they think that is going to make you feel a certain way. And therefore, they are adjusting what words they're using, without changing the informational value of it. And to me, that is the indicator that we're actually shifting, like 60s and hippies was probably a boom of this emotional thing, right? And it actually opened up a little bit path to the next level, but let's not go there. Maybe a different podcast theme, but that kind of created a little portal to the next level. So as we create a portal, now we can develop where we are. So that's why, to me, the translation of the spoken words is the next thing. And if I would look into the future, who knows, let's say 100 years from now, we will have a thought process that will be able to get captured by a computer and automatically, without bypassing all of the spoken language, because we all think on the same language, on the human language. Skip all of the translation and translate it all to ones and zeros. And maybe quantum computers are the tools that will help us.
Great, thank you. That's good. So what basically I get from what you're saying, and maybe I'm misinterpreting it, I'm pushing my own agenda, but one thing we already mentioned, I think, is the immediacy of feedback is very important. And I usually do my over-dramatized example is, if I go to IKEA and I buy a very big shelf and I bring it home and take it out, all the parts and whatnot, pieces, and then let's say I try and assemble it in a dark room. I just feeling my way around. I feel, okay, here's the bolt here, and then, oh, here's the hole. I put it in, I tighten, and I keep going and assembling, and then I flip the light on and it's all crooked, right? Why? Because I did not get feedback on what I'm doing. I'm doing a lot of work and I'm very skilled and I know how to, but without that feedback, I work in the dark. And currently I feel that way when I'm building software is, where's the feedback? I have to wait. As soon as you are forced to stop and wait, you lose your flow and your quality of work just goes down the drain. It's not possible to have high quality of work if there are lags. If you're cooking and you have to wait for 5 hours to see if the salt you added is enough, or if I'm tuning the guitar and I can't hear it. I have to, run some script, and then 5 hours later, it tells me, "Oh, you're off by this much." That absence.
Or even after you played the entire song, it tells you, "Oh, actually, the first note was wrong."
Oh, wrong, and yeah. So everything else in life we're doing is based on physicality, immediate feedback, except software development, where that feedback is absent. And so, like you're saying, maybe if we get to the point quickly to speak the word and then learn immediately whether what was spoken broke something or didn't break something, that's very important. Because in just speaking and everything gets automatically translated, to me, that would be, again, I would freak out. Because I don't like making changes without knowing whether I still have the system that's up and running or not. But in the current, as you know, you have to wait sometimes for weeks, sometimes months to learn whether your system is still running or not.
Yeah.
And that just cannot create quality. Impossible. No wonder we have such lousy systems, right? Because it's not down to skills of people. It's just down to the way system is set up to deprive you of any feedback. And I think that's one breakthrough we need to work on, is what do we have to do so that I know, same as when I'm playing a guitar or making food or gardening, I know immediately whether what I did right now makes sense or not. So that's one point. Right?
Well, with that said, let's take a look at the different types of software development. I'm going to use the development word for now. So let's say we have a web development and we have an app development, the classical, typical 1980s, 1990s. In the web development, you have HTML, for example, code. You have HTML-based pages. You have a PHP code, let's say. You have a server-side based languages. And the app development, you have potentially Visual C++, right? Visual Basic. So when you're developing HTML, you change code, you refresh the page, automatic. You see the results right away. So literally you can type as you type, and right now in the browsers, switching to dev mode, you can actually change your web page in real time. So you get the real feedback. You experiment in your dev mode in the browser, you get what you want, and it's localized to you. Then you take this code and then you promote it to your environment. And now you see others because you know what the code is going to behave like. With the PHP, for example, it's slightly different, right? In order to, it's now sitting on the server, so it's further away from the consumer. And when it comes to Visual Basic, Visual C++, well, now you have to compile it, right? And it's the same thing. Maybe the shift to the web apps is essentially that. So no longer we have an application that we have to ship once a year, and if there is something with it, we have to code it, we have to compile it, and we have to wait another cycle. We need to print CDs, and we need to ship another print CDs. Windows 95 was a perfect example. You can download an update, you have to wait. With the web apps, that sort of change cycle reduced dramatically. And I remember at Microsoft, we had circles, right? We had a circles of consumers. So fresh code goes out, and as it's written, and I know we may be talking slightly about different levels where the feedback is needed, but you get it to, for example, we had an inner circles, right? We have a dog food. It's essentially, if there is an Outlook development team, they use a fresh build of Outlook. Forget about the emailing on Outlook. It's most of the time their software doesn't work, but that's the purpose of it, right? Then you shift it for beta testers, then initial release, and then off you go to public. So that risk and that experimentation, and rather risk acceptance, is what drove the ability to get the feedback quicker. So in this case, I see a direct correlation between experimentation and risk taking and accepting the risk with the feedback.
However, but that's false feedback. That's not real feedback, because what we get from that is works on my computer. Works on my computer doesn't mean anything. And as a matter of fact, it's a dirty, right now it's considered as the stupidest thing anyone can say, right? Just because it works on your computer, that's not feedback at all.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you refresh in your browser, it works, but then you ship it and then somebody else using different client, it's broken. So that's not the feedback I'm talking about. I'm talking about the real feedback, the real system. It's not broken because we don't want false positives. And we hear that all the time. When something breaks and you go back like, guys, how did it happen? I don't know, it works on my computer. But that's grounds for dismissal at this point, right? It's like, you're not qualified to do this job. If you think that something gave you positive feedback on your computer and that's good enough, that's not professional enough, right? So I'm talking about real system. For example, my favorite, and again, another thing that we need to bring into the picture is, so far, the way we've been discussing this is a sole loner sitting in a corner in his basement and pounding on the keyboard and creating software. Well, today that barely ever happens. Today software is being created by teams. Right. So my favorite model of creating software would be, I don't know if you ever used Google Docs. So, and if you ever use Google Docs, shared with a number of people, not just by yourself. So if you're making changes to that doc, or is it a spreadsheet, it doesn't matter. Others may be making changes at the same time, and you see them making changes while you're making changes, right? So there's no need for branches, for pull requests, for code reviews. Software development must happen like that, so that as we are working as a team, all these changes are happening in real time, and I can see them, and they can see my changes, and I can see when they're stepping on my toes, and then we can quickly go off and say, well, what are you doing? Why are you changing this thing that I changed, right? So all the conflicts get resolved in real time. And furthermore, to crank it up one notch, all that is happening in production.
Right. So, but you see how with the Google Docs compared to a printed document, you actually introduce the fragility or the instability of the system that actually led to ability to collaborate and get the immediate results, right? Your printed document, this is it. Yeah. There is nobody can screw with it anymore.
Yeah.
You cannot mess it up. It is solid.
Yeah.
There is no collaboration, absolutely, because now you have to pass it, you have to reprint it. That's what I was talking about, the compilation steps, yeah. Right? You type it, you print it, boom, there you go, you compile it, you have it. By introducing this fragility, and not in a bad sense, to the system, that's where the system does become dynamic.
And from I wouldn't call it fragility, it's just volatility. And volatility is desirable for experimentation.
Absolutely, yeah, that's yeah, a much better word.
You can't break a Google Doc. It's always up and running.
Right.
You just change the content, right?
Right. So that's why, like, speaking from the SRE practices, right? And in our project that we work together, you can kind of remember my frustration is when the SRE was not allowed in production.
Mm-hmm.
My concept, my operational concept, I don't care about non-production.
Of course.
Because I actually want to know production.
Of course.
Exactly. I don't care that it works on your computer. I want to make sure, I want to see that it works on 1,000 users.
Because that's the only thing that matters.
Exactly. Yeah. An ability to kind of find out what doesn't work. Like, for example, you introduce a broken change, breaking change. You push it to production after you type it in. Right? The first customer gets it. They see an error. Well, that's already too late. What should be is some sort of layer in between, right? That sees that it's going to result in error, automatically changes it, and now serves an update to the customer. Yeah. It is much better. It's a typical SRE thing. It's much better to serve a slow page rather than broken page.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, collaboration in production in real time is needed, which now we're talking about immediate feedback. You know exactly how the system behaves. And I don't care if it works perfectly in some smoke test environment, in some simulation. I don't care.
No.
I want to see how it will work in front of people who are paying money for it. That's the only thing that matters. Nothing else matters. So another thing I think I would, if you have the time, I don't want to keep you too long, that I would like to maybe quickly discuss. But tell me if you have the time. I don't want to push it.
I just want to make a last comment on the
course.
previous topic, right? So I'm actually a fan of having two environments. One is the sandbox and one is production. I give a benefit of a doubt because if I say one environment, many people are going to freak out. The more environments that you have, just like you said, smoke test this, stage that, even DRs these days are just waste of money and somebody's job description.
And what would be the purpose of the sandbox?
Experimentation for something that is not planned to be for people. It's essentially experimentation of the experiment. So the production would be still going to have a purpose of the experimentation, how to make it work. But the sandbox is something that just we're going to experiment using, for example, brand new technology. See how it works. If it works, if it fits the purpose, yes, okay, and put it in production. Okay. So it's kind of like, you can say dev production, but I want to have a little bit more of an experimentation concept in it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so basically we talked about technical side and how to get immediate feedback or near real-time feedback. That's desirable. And I just want to quickly shift the focus on the logistics and on the process of working. And you know very well the idiocy of gated phases and project-based way of working, where first you go away and you collect all the requirements and you spend a lot of time defining them, and and then you freeze them, right? And then frozen requirements are given to designers. Now this is like a blueprint of that. They design something, they freeze the design, give it to the coders. They use that as a blueprint, write the code complete, freeze it, over to testers. Moronic, right? It's just idiocy to nth degree. And that's why we prefer agile, right? And DevOps, because in that new way of working, everything happens at the same time. All these activities happening right now. There's no waiting on anyone. First you do this and then handoffs, nothing like that, right? So one thing that recently I started poking around and discussing with people, and it's just like very hard to sell, is the recognition that there's absolutely zero need for estimating anything. And that seems to be very hard pill to swallow. But in my opinion, to spend even 5 seconds on estimating anything is a waste of time. It's just completely useless and could be harmful. But I cannot see the utility of estimating at all. I don't know what your opinion on that is.
I don't agree with your statement that it could be harmful. It will be.
It will be. All right.
Yeah,
okay.
There is actually, the estimation is, I came across this article as I was trying to learn how do you estimate in Agile. And that article is absolutely amazing. I don't remember who was by, but I'm pretty sure it's by one of those guys who invented Agile or something like this, right? The sort of the crux of it is that estimation is software development estimation is essentially suffering from, cartography fractal syndrome. Is that the more details you gather for your estimation, the longer the period is going to be. And essentially, if you put it into the mathematical form, it's going to be that the more details you get, the closer your estimated period is going to be to infinity. So in that case, absolutely waste of time. But there is one purpose that estimation serves, and that is it's keeping project managers employed. And until we have project managers, I think it's virtually impossible to get rid of estimation.
Right.
And when I say project managers, it became a hot commodity these days. Do you know, for example, that the project manager's rate, contractual rate, is in some cases even higher than the senior developer, software developer rate? That completely blows my mind, because it's essentially executive administrator is making more money than CEO.
Yeah, I know.
I'm going to keep the emotions down on this topic because
but again, I mean, this is the thing. If you are averse to experimentation, then you're doing projects. If you're doing projects, then you need paper pushers. What are paper pushers going to do? They're going to ask for estimations.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just going to quickly wrap this up on the estimation. Is one thing that how I push back when people say, "But we need estimation." I'm like, how are you doing it? I'm like, well, the way I do things, I just grab the most important thing that needs to be done now, and I just do it. But how do you know which is the most important thing? Well, if I don't know which is the most important thing, I'm not qualified for the job. If you put me in a different context, for example, I need to fix an escalator that's broken. I don't know what's the most important thing to do right now because I'm not qualified for the job. But if the crew who is on the location and they don't know what's the most important thing to do right now, these guys are bozos. They shouldn't be paid. And for some reason, you cannot explain that to people. That, hey, everybody should know, if you're a pro, you should know what right now, at this moment, if you're on a job, you should know without a trace of a doubt, there's only one, at any point in time, there's only one most important thing to be attended to right now. If you don't know that, you're not a pro. That's my thesis. I don't know why people think, yeah, you cannot know that, but then why are you on the job?
Well, in my opinion, people say that because, again, like it comes down to how we started this conversation. It's the version of responsibility and accountability. The people who actually are capable of deciding what is the most important thing are simply avoiding making that decision, because then they will be on the hook. So it's much easier and more convenient for them to listen to the ivory tower, what's the most important thing. And the funny thing about ivory tower is that they are the most disconnected from understanding why one important or another.
They would just say pee in this cup and we'll let you know later.
Yeah.
Go to the lab.
But considering how quickly this software development boomed in the last 5, 10, 15 years with the it's almost like a dot-com boom of 2000s repeating itself, but now we have way more money involved. We have companies burning millions of dollars on the software development a month and sometimes a week without actually solving the real problem. And in my opinion, that is because we have such an abundance of wealth in the Western society that it's okay to spend 5, 10, 20 million. It's okay to pay somebody $100, $150, $200 an hour to keep the seat warm because the money keep coming. And that's why there is no really sort of need for the experimentation. There is no need for getting something right, getting something done. There is a need, more and more need for the estimation, because we need to show these graphs, we need to show the progress to the people who are actually signing the paychecks. And the more accurate our estimation seems, and the accurate is also in binary years, the better it is. Because now we can say, listen, job is done. And everybody's like, oh, great, we spent 2 weeks. We know that in 6 months, the project is going to be done. Forget about it. Let's chill for 6 months. And in 6 months, we'll be like, what the hell, why it's not done? Why hasn't it started, right? And again, that is because the avoidance of risks That's the avoidance of accountability and ownership. I don't know, I might be this on this train right now of the personal accountability and responsibility.
No, that's it.
That's coming from that.
No, that's it. It's not. It's universal, right? But the real clincher to me is when people are estimating the estimates.
Oh yeah.
That's, to me, that's like, okay, now this is precious. You're being asked to estimate your estimates. This is precious.
Yeah. Well, you know, just like in cooking, those recipes that work best in my experience are the one that says cook until done. That is my favorite recipes, when they say cook until done.
Yeah.
It's because you need to experiment. Like if somebody said, like, for example, I'll give you example in my recent bread making experience. I have a bread machine. Bread comes out perfect every time. You measure stuff, you put it in, you push the button, and it times it perfect. It's a computer, right? It knows exactly, and there's a consistent result. It will never be better. It can never be worse. Now, when you're making bread by hand, now there is way more volatility there in that system. But you have a much higher potential of making such a bread that you've never had before, like absolutely amazing. And you cook it until it's done. Today it could be 40 minutes. Tomorrow there is a different, you know, atmospheric pressure. It's 45 minutes.
Yeah, and same is with the analog photography.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same thing. It's the fermentation.
Yeah.
But back to what you said previously, you know, I told you I organized last year this TDD conference, and in the process, I was really lucky to get in touch with some really amazing people, and we became friends, and we're in touch and we talk like you and I talk now. And then some of them are really great, and then I'm asking them, so how is it going? Like now that you know you've exposed yourself, you gave a talk at the TDD conference. Did you get more, you know, I don't want to say credibility, but more traction? You know, I was hoping for that conference to snap things into focus so that people can go back to the workplace and say, look, this is really important and here's why, blah, blah, blah. He says, nah. And I'm like, why? He says, this company is making so much money. They absolutely don't care about technical excellence or any such thing. They just, it's all about, just like you say, going through the motions, pushing this paper, counting number story points, you know, just measuring outcomes, and off you go. And please, can you chill and leave me alone with your TDD and all your crap, right? And so you're right. The wealth is insane. And why would companies flush with money care about some slowing down and, you know, whatever, right? And which brings me to the topic I want to talk about. It's regulations, like, and you know, the building code. Like if you are, let's say you're designing and building a new model of the automobile, you want to put a new car on the market. And now you want to compete on the price, and you're looking and saying, oh, wow, how can we cut the price? Well, we can save some money and offer the car cheaper in the market if we don't put in the airbags. You know? And we don't put the seat belts, and you can start removing things. And well, guess what? The government is going to jump in and say, no, you can't, right? Because it's regulated. It's protecting its citizens. But software is not regulated. We're not protected by anyone. You and I can whip up some bullshit app, and if we have the marketing muscle, we put it out and shove it in front of people to start using it, and maybe our app is doing something harmful. And what happens? Maybe there's a scandal in a newspaper, and like, oh, bad boys, blah, blah. Okay, we fold the company, we turn around and open another one, right? There is no consequences in this industry for bad behavior, for crappy quality and harmful, right? So I think that needs to change. There's got to be some punitive measures. That people go to jail, or there will be millions of dollars of fine if you release a product that's doing something bad. And anytime I talk about that, all the geeks go, no, you're killing creativity, blah, blah, blah. It's not killing. I'm not saying that the government should step in and tell you, you need to use C#, this version. Same as with car industry. They're not stepping into the plant and saying, you need to use these tools and this is how you build a car. All they're saying is once you're done and you put it in the market, if it's harmful, we're going to discontinue and you're going to do a recall, right? So I think we need same kind of recall and worldwide punitive measurements for lousy software.
So that's a very interesting topic, because I don't have a single opinion about this. I have somewhat conflicting arguments that I can bring up. So argument number one, I'm going to start with against. Actually, I don't even know if it's going to be for or against. The argument number one, to a certain degree, some of the governmental bodies in the world are having that ability and actually exercising this, right? For example, European Union, they are imposing fines left, right, and centers to huge corporations like Google, Facebook, for certain misbehavior in their software business, right? Russia has the same way. When it comes, so from the government level, there is something, right? I'm not necessarily saying it fits the purpose or it doesn't, but there is a body that's, could potentially have something like this. Now, if we bring it to the organizational level, having a body within organization could increase the bureaucracy, and not just increase it, right?
I don't think it shouldn't be inside the organization, it should be outside. The pressure must come from the outside.
Well, and that's where it's interesting, because now is it a government? So so within the government, but it's still government. We know it's bureaucratic. There is no agility in government, and if we are trying to get agility within the organizations, and it's in the larger the organization, the tougher it is. Imagine when it's like the largest organization in the country, and that is the government, essentially.
Nevertheless, we do have building codes, and they are protecting us.
Yes, but just like somebody I know who I'm actually having a talk right now with, we have a privilege of unlimited experimentation in the software. With a house, for example, that I'm in, you cannot all of a sudden change, oh, you know what? All of the structure that we use is pine based. And then tomorrow we change the code, so now it should be spruce based. So all of the houses in the neighborhood are going to be brought in and changed that.
Look, but that shouldn't be a problem so long as you still retain sprinklers and smoke alarms. Like the government.
No, I understand, but that's why I brought it to this extreme example, is that, like, for example, sprinkler, they're not forcing to retrofit all their houses with a sprinkler. It's all about new houses.
Yeah.
It's because they don't have an ability to change it. That's why they're creating these harsh rules. So if the reasons, for example, they had release gates, the reason why there is the different environments is also because of that. They're more sort of hard to change end result is Windows 95. You cannot just, inject the update. The more testing it goes through, right? It went Windows 95, then it was Windows 98. It took 3 years to develop.
But this is all behind the closed door. All I'm saying is when you put something on the market, that thing makes some kind of effect, right? And that effect,
I agree,
is measured. And if it's not within the parameters, or if, for example, Equifax all of a sudden is caught leaking my social insurance number to hackers, then they should be punished, maybe shut down.
But that's behavioral, right? Are we talking about behavioral building code? Are we talking about
only behavior? No structure, doesn't matter. How you build it, don't care. How it behaves, what is the consequences of your software operating, and that has to be regulated. Saying no leaking of any privacy information. If you get caught leaking, you are shut down. No, other whatever. There's a building code saying these things are not allowed to happen with your product, right? Same as your car doesn't have airbags. Yeah, but it's never going to crash. Don't care. It has to have airbag.
So that's my exactly point. There is regulations like this already. For example, the privacy information regulation in Canada or in European Union.
Right, but what happens when it gets? The question here is what happens when it gets violated? That's the clincher.
There is a huge fines. Yes.
Fine. So
audits, fines. Yes.
Yeah. The reason I'm saying this is unless there is a severe outside pressure, these companies, with their flush with money, will never consider upping their technical excellence level. Unless
but
they
see, but this is not related to technical. That's why I ask it: is it behavioral or is it technical?
Well,
because let me ask you this thing: are you gonna saying that, for example, let's say unit tests has to be, the coverage should be 100% before it makes to the market? Because if that body,
how you do it doesn't matter. What effect it does when it starts operating in real world. For example, maybe you don't give a shit about technical excellence because you're rolling in dough. You release some products, and because they're so fragile, they crash and burn. The uptime is horrible. Meanwhile, some hospital, somebody depends on that. What is the consequence to you to that? If you're not severely punished, you're not going to be upping your game. They don't care how you make it up and run. One way or another, whether you have unit tests or not, they don't care. And it doesn't matter really. But you have to comply with some 5 nines, whatever the government says. If you're in this business, you're supplying these services, you're not allowed to go below that. Otherwise, we're going to shut you down. That's the only thing that can make them sit up and say, oh shit, we have to now. Otherwise, why would they spend money on? Because you see, when I talk to business people and I try to explain technical excellence, that's a no-go for them, because all they care about is behavior. Is a system behaving like it does? Yeah. Are the customers ever going to see the code structure? No. Why do I give a shit? Why do I care? I'm not selling code structure to the customer, right? If it's spaghetti code, I don't care.
Yeah,
because you have 2 applications behave exactly the same. One is horrendous spaghetti code, build big ball of mud. Another one is beautifully structured. To the business, same difference. Why do I?
No, exactly. And to regulation would be the same difference.
Exactly. They don't care. But if the spaghetti code starts misbehaving and doing something that, then they do care. They should care. And they should step in and say, look, we're shutting you down. You cannot remain in operation. Now they will say, holy shit, why is this happening? Because we have spaghetti. All right, now let's get in the crew that knows how to build things properly. That's the only way, I think, to move forward.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. It is in place. Like, although I hate, when somebody says, oh, we have it, but it is in place. The system is in place.
Why is it not working? Why do I still have companies who are saying, I don't care, why should I?
Because they're not serving the regulated businesses. Just like you said, for example, the hospital software equipment, it is heavily regulated and there are heavily fines. And as a matter of fact, I remember several years ago, I was contacted by recruiters about some position, and I don't remember either it was a banking or if it was a medical field. And as a contractor, as an independent contractor, I was required to have an insurance. I don't remember the exact terms of that insurance, but it's essentially that if my work within that organization, the code that I write, affects their end customers, they can go after me, but that insurance is going to protect me.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying is that, as far as I'm aware, the mechanisms are in place.
Yeah, but this is
unless you go to the organization that is serving the customers, and that relationship is regulated by the government body, the system is in place.
Yeah, I agree. And again, okay, that's a good point. So rather than maybe regulating software companies, we should regulate that
industry. Yeah. Industry. Because, for example, imagine you and I right now, we're talking on Zoom, right? And Zoom crashes, or there's like horrible quality about this thing. Let's say you pay, I don't know, $10 a month for the Zoom subscription. And you go to Zoom and say, like, this was completely garbage, right? So number one, the free market rules is that, well, feel free to use something else. Rule number two, since you paid for it and your experience wasn't the best, so how long did you use your software for? Well, you pay for 1 month, right? Internet services are the best and the worst in that case. If you had an outage for 1 day and you try to call Shaw and ask for a compensation, they will compensate you for this 1 day. So if you're paying $90 a month, they'll give you $3 back. They don't care about loss of business. They don't care about this and that. And that is why I would imagine, well, I doubt that actually utility companies have such responsibility. For example, for hospitals, if the hospital light goes out or internet goes down, it's not really up to utilities, because they can, they can blame it on force majeure. You can blame it on acts of God, even if they don't believe in it. But now
they believe in his acts.
they believe in their acts, exactly. But that's why they have to have generators. That's why they have to mediate those potential.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Shortfalls.
Let me ask you this. So recently I was using Microsoft Teams, and I noticed that when you start recording the session, they show you this window to the side, which automatically transcription of what is being said, right? Now, suppose I am hard of hearing or deaf, right? And I rely on that transcription, and there's an important business meeting, and the glitch in transcription causes me to invest millions of dollars and lose. Can I go after Microsoft Teams and ask for compensation because it's their glitch, right?
Well, funny you say about that. So first of all, the whole system has changed from opt-in to opt-out now. Mm-hmm. So if before you have to say, yes, I agree to participate, now you're participating by default. Mm-hmm. And you can have an option to opt out. And the reason for that is because now when you install the software, there is a 50,000 pages service agreement that makes sure that it's captured there. So if you go into the Microsoft Teams service agreement, I am pretty sure that there is a
disclaimer.
Fat lawyer somewhere already put that in place, right? Because even before they shipped it, they knew that. But here's another interesting model that the companies are using, the industries are using, to remove themselves from the accountability. And remember, we started with that, right? So the accountability starts with a junior developer, and it ends with a CEO. And everybody in between wants to avoid accountability. And therefore, they create everything to make sure that they're not accountable and somebody else is. So now, the way that the software companies are exploiting that, if you notice that there are more and more software offerings out there which are free. So that free software essentially gives you, it exploits the free market mentality. So even Windows this time is free, right? Back in the days, you have to pay for it. And when you're paying, you're actually exchanging something of the value for something of the value. And if you, for example, if you give a half 100 or half a 20 at the store, they're not going to take it, right? So it's the same thing here. You give them a full, let's say $100 for the software, and you expect the quality code in return. Now everything is free. So you can get 100% refund from zero.
Yeah. So okay,
but let me actually add a slightly different concept on this argument. So if we are creating software, and if you say that software is somewhat like an art, it's not a trade, it's an art, then having a regulation it's all like creating some sort of gallery rules on what paint should be, what the size of the painting should be, and in some way it does restrict the creativity. But rather than saying it restricts creativity, I would flip it the other way, is that lack of the regulation is what is allowing creativity. So it's like, saying same thing, but from the slightly different concept. So in this case, if we connect it to the experimentation, right? So by saying that we should be able to experiment more and more, we should be able to push it to production quicker, essentially should unshackle us from regulation. So to me, those two concepts combined together, at least from the perspective that I'm looking at them right now, are conflicting. So one cannot exist with another. Gotcha. I might be mistaken.
No, it makes sense. So basically, what we are at this point, when we look at all these successful operations, and I know for a fact some of them are employing some brilliant people who are actually prevented from realizing their brilliant ideas because they're saying, why bother? And there is no force to make them rethink that. So the only way out of that pretty ugly predicament would be if indeed these companies get pushed by whatever forces, I don't know, to start experimenting. Because obviously right now they're not experimenting. Right? They're making a killing without experimenting. And why should they change the winning team, right? On the other hand, we see some other big players, and I don't want to name names, but there's a lot of these that are constantly, but we started this discussion with like that left the projects behind, and this is elephant graveyard, and now they're 100% experimenting. So there's a hope that this will swell and create the overall business climate where you cannot survive without experimenting. Because there's apparently no other force that will push you and get you into the predicament where you're saying, okay, we can't continue like this. Shoddy workmanship just cannot keep us afloat anymore. Because obviously right now it can't, right? We know a lot of organizations which, who cares, like, technical debt is mounting, we're garbage in, garbage out, substandard shit, barely works, keeps crashing. There's a huge disclaimer in the, yep. you clicked on I accept terms and conditions, and like, stalemate, right? Bite me. And that doesn't look good for the future, right? If it continues that way.
Well, my example in that would be, remember ACPAC?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What happened to it? And that's exactly it, right? That's exactly the sort of the fate of those companies. However, there are companies that are becoming the IT companies these days, which have zero market. Oh my God, what's the word? Help me out here. When there's like two companies and they compete, there is no market competition.
Mm-hmm. Monopoly.
It's even more than monopoly, because monopoly, like let's say Apple is a monopoly, right? Just as an example. If there is somebody else emerges, Apple is big enough to swallow them, but there is a place for them to be. Now, when you have government, let's say City of Vancouver, can you compete with City of Vancouver? No.
Yeah.
So it's even not even a monopoly. It's, I don't know what's the word for that, but it's essentially it's a government thing, right? Like we have ICBC, NBC, we have TransLink, we have BC Hydro is another example, where it's not just it's a monopoly, it's a crown corporation, and based on all those rules, you're not even allowed to have a company emerge to compete with them. So my question would be, what is their reason for innovation? Because we worked in one of those, and to me, there was absolutely zero reason for innovation for them.
Yeah, because they're not, their game is not profit. Yeah. So you can only have monopolies in the profit arena, profit making. These guys are money spenders.
Mm-hmm. So actually, I was talking to, I had become an acquaintance with one of the Scrum Master, who happened to be in the politics as well. I think he is in the Tri-City political game, and we actually brought up exactly the same question. We discussed it, and he said that there is on the government level, there is an attempt to push the organization, and crown corporations are the primary candidates for this push, to move away from the profit rating, right? So for example, Lululemon is better than Nike because Lululemon innovates better than Nike, right? Apple is better than Microsoft because Apple allows something, or Microsoft is better than Apple because Microsoft allows that. But this is more becomes into the social responsibility. Mm-hmm. So in this case, this is where I see that there is an embryo of that regulation that you're talking about. So now rather than saying that an outage
or the crash of the system or bug in the system translates directly into the dollar amount, and therefore we can find a company that dollar amount or that dollar amount times X. They're looking at the social aspect of the value that the company provides. For example, how does it make people feel?
Yeah.
How does it make people interact with each other? And this is, I actually want to bring it back to when I was talking about the physical, intellectual, and emotional growth of the human beings. This is where we see that. So we kind of went from, because the connection to a dollar now goes into like, what is the other value? Because money every day becomes less and less valuable because you can print more. And although it kind of like, it lose the value, but not really, you can still, buy shit with it. But now if you're looking at the social responsibility, and I know it's a very blank statement and nobody knows what's under it, but it's like, exactly, how does it make you feel? How does, for example, city of Surrey and city of Burnaby compare to each other, not based on their value of the homes or, how much people make, the median age and all that stuff, but there's some sort of emotional satisfaction factor. So I believe we're on at the dawn of this shift in the way that civilization is structuring, civilization is interacting, and it essentially can feed the way that we do software.
Okay, so yeah, it makes sense, and we can even call it ethical profit.
Yes, actually, that's exactly the word that they use. Yes, thank you.
Ethical profit. Ethical. It's profit, nevertheless. You're profiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that should hopefully create enough pressure to force people who are laggards or just like chilling and not really trying their best.
And I think, sorry, I keep wanting to add this thing and I keep forgetting. So I believe, and actually thank you very much for identifying that for me a couple of years ago, is I think that within the organization, so if you have some sort of government body or governing body, within the organization, you have to have some sort of agents that acting like in the interest of the governing body, even if the governing body is the customer. And in my opinion, Google has this amazing breakthrough by developing an SRE practice, because now SRE becomes the police. SRE doesn't care about nothing but production, so it solves a problem there. SRE is also neither in the software development nor finance business, so it's closer to the separation of church and state. And at the end of the day, there is less gates within the SRE. It's like, ship shitty code, but if it doesn't work, we're going to revert it back, right? So there is like a bit of an authority.
Yeah. But that's the thing, you need to be aware. If I'm doing things, of course, I'm trying to do my best, but to me, to be able to relax and trust my environment, because not everything depends on me, it would really help if I know that there will be consequences for irresponsible behavior. Mm-hmm. Right now, I don't see that, right? You and I can sit down and create something really good and valuable, but then, it may get kiboshed, or, somebody at a cheaper rate undercuts us and delivers crap, right? Because there's no, and that's what I'm talking about with this software breakthroughs. It has to be more ethical, has to be more focused on quality, and not just saying, well, that's how the cookie crumbles, what can you do? That's not good enough anymore.
Well, I think the customers are going to speak. Like, for example, there is still market for $5 t-shirts, and then there is a market for $500 t-shirt.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. On that note, I took too much of your time. Thank you very much. This was brilliant.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And we have to continue, because I think we are making some really valid learning and teaching points here. And I personally learned a lot today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully we can continue. I think the topic deserves more push. Because if we don't do it, nobody's going to do it, I think.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's I kind of connected to the everything that's happening in life to the this genius invention by Maslow in his pyramid of needs.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when you have fresh developers, their immediate needs is money. Once you kind of stabilize and you gain a real seniority, not just by years, but the real seniority, your needs change. So right now we're not talking about what is the best algorithm to use for this or that. We're talking about something like a little bit more eternal topics, like a little bit more out there, and having the right people in a discussion is probably going to bring more productivity to it. Because, for example, if you bring young, fresh developers right now, there's a very, very small percentage of them are going to be able to even discuss these topics. Because first of all, they rely on their superiors because they still need to make their names. And they will rely on what they've read rather than on what they've done.
Yeah. But, I hope we can get quickly out of that emotional or drama layer and a breakthrough into the purpose. Because right now, as you know, a lot of people are using agile of becoming, turning into a be nice to people. So like if you claim your agile organization, that means I'm being very nice to people. But what is the purpose in that? Like everybody, we're all great, we're all fantastic. And then I think a more fulfilling state is finding your purpose, your autonomy, mastery, and all that. Right? So I think we need to break through that.
So on that topic, you probably saw that I posted probably even several months now a questionnaire on the LinkedIn.
Uh-huh.
Would you rather have somebody who knows what they're doing but not really nice, or somebody super nice but have no clue what they're doing? So it was very small sample size of the replies, but what I've noticed is that software people, the people who actually do write software, they prefer people with skill.
Mm-hmm.
But people who trade people,
mm-hmm.
and that is recruiters, they want to have nice people
mm-hmm.
because it's easier to sell them, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And another example out of my personal life, and this is like the most recent example, like literally fresh off the press. So in the house, since I moved in, and because it's a brand new place, remote from where I used to live, I'm seeking a house cleaner, single guy. I don't want to spend hours on, cleaning toilets and, scrubbing bathtubs. So I've found a couple of places, experimented with one, got the cleaner in, super nice person, very polite, very accommodating, very this is that. But I would give it probably 7 out of 10 in her cleaning ability, because there is lots of missed places, and it's not even like I'm going with the white glove and like, oh, there's still dust here and there. It's my sort of level of clean, and if it doesn't match, it has nothing against that person. I'm not gonna try to change that person. It's just, no, give me a different one. But this is exactly where the word is. You look at the customer service rather than the quality of the product, right? Because people, they will eat shit as long as it's well presented, as long as it's if their needs and their emotions are taken care of, because there is more and more exploiting of the emotions. And again, it's because us as in Western civilization, our basic needs of the income, of the security is fulfilled. We haven't experienced war in the Western civilization for over 80 years.
And also we are now at the brink of, at least we are hoping, and it seems to be happening, where we don't think competence matters anymore. Why? Because we rely on machines. So competence, leave that to machines. And if you have competent people, like if you're running a company and now you you are hiring competent people, you know that these people will be harder to control. The more competent you are, nobody can control you. Do you want that? Or would you like to have obedient, emotional, people who are so easy to manipulate and, and that's why recruiters and all this, like you said, in people trading professions, let's go for being nice. Even if you're incompetent, it doesn't matter. There's this machine, it can really do a much better job than you. And I think we're moving in that direction where we are like, leave competence to machines. I'm experimenting. Sorry, just quickly I'm right now experimenting with this thing called GitHub Copilot. I don't know if you tried that. And have you heard of GitHub Copilot?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've heard the name. I'm not really familiar.
Yeah. So what they did is, and technical terms escape me now because it's Sunday, but they use this latest iteration of the AI, grandiose number crunching power of processing text. And Microsoft bought GitHub, right, 2 years ago. And they had this project to crunch, they use 54 billion repos. Yeah. And they taught this machine how to code. And now you can have it as your co-pilot sitting next to you. And basically the way it works is I go in and I can type a comment like, calculate number of days from today until September 15th. As soon as I'm done writing this comment, this guy gives me a routine that does that perfectly. I don't have to change anything, right? Or you can open a unit test file and you can say something and it will give you a whole bunch of tests, right? So, and then, I was playing a lot with that, all kinds of things. And you don't have to write a comment. You can just write a routine, maybe a method name with parameters, and it reads it, understands it, and gives you the implementation code. And Anton, I can tell you, that code is in no way inferior to like a mediocre guy's code. I don't see anything wrong with that code. Furthermore, when it gives you that code, you can hit control square bracket, and you can browse through a number of alternate solutions. You pick the one you like, and it's watching you and it's learning from us. And if I go in and I refactor that code, it's learning from me. So it's a learning machine. So you agree that it will be sending back your actions. And this is now in diapers. This is an early preview, pre-beta, right? I can imagine after a few years of this thing being in, it could be your pretty solid implementation coder. I don't need them, right? I can see people just going to write a comment and boom, there you go, right? Crazy, but competence, right? It replaces competent coders with machines.
Yeah, but the funny thing is you would need less of them. So right now, as the organizations are bloating their software developer departments, in some way it is becoming a bubble that's gonna stabilize at some point, right? And it's kind of funny the way that you explain it. It's exactly what I was referring to just about an hour ago, right? Where machines will understand English, and translate it into whatever language you want.
I can show you later. We can sit down. You just write a single sentence, your intention, like I would like this, and it does it. I mean, I didn't say it. I typed it, but it's one step from that to me actually saying, "Hey, can you write me this?" And it is quite competent. But you can think about this is very, very early stages. It's still in diapers.
But if you really think about the structure of, let's say, any programming language is way more primitive than any human language.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's actually, in some way, it's easier to create that translation mechanism from English to, let's say, C# than it is from English to Russian.
Yeah.
And if we already have a very, very nice way to translate things in the real time, like with the lenses on the phones now, why not translate from English to C#? And there you go. As 2 hours pass and the system is there already.
Yeah,
from the idea to the solution.
And the beauty is it is always giving you more than one way to skin a cat. And you can choose whichever one you prefer, or you can just hit the escape key and say, shut up. Because you're the pilot. He's not the pilot, right? So right there, what we were talking about is being nice to people and finding purpose more important than being competent.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting conundrum, because maybe your purpose is to be competent.
But I wouldn't say it's more important, because as we develop and as humans develop from, let's say, physical ability, like look at the Greek gods, right? Like they're all, very well built and stuff, right? And then to the intellectual and then to the emotional, we will have the sort of the ideal model of the human would have, let's say, balanced development in each of those things, right? You will have an outliers, like you will have what's the quantum physician that recently passed, genius guy, right? But crippled, like completely with wheelchair.
Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking, yeah, perfect example, right? Where you have one side of the human developed so high, and the other is it's zero development, atrophy, yeah. So the same thing here, but I think going a little bit more on the metaphysical values is, if you as a human being, if you are competent, and if you're emotionally stable, and if you're physically developed, that is, the purpose of life, maybe. Well, at least it is the development of those is for me.
But but societal pressures now, and this is probably in the early infancy, as we talked about, is we'd rather you not be competent, because you think you will fit better. If you're competent, you will be the oddball, because all the rest of the people here are in the church and they're like call it singing hymns, and there's all this guy who's thinking too much. Like, but we don't need that. We don't need your competence. We need you to join here and the choir, right? And that will be a bit of a, I don't know.
So with that said, so here's the thing, right? So a lot of people say that there's like 1% of the population controls the other 99%. The 1% of the population has 99% of the wealth, and the 99% of the population has 1% of the wealth, and all that stuff, right? So I am at the stage in my life where, rather than think that there is a 5% somewhere, I want to be in that 5%. Mm-hmm. So if somebody tells me that, all those, for example, people profit during this pandemic, rather than me complaining that somebody profit, I can say, yes, we did, mm-hmm. because I did. And so I think it's a shift of the mentality where, would you rather spend your energy on judging or complaining about that 1%, 5% population, or do you rather spend your energy on becoming 1 and 5%? But the funny thing, regardless of which path you choose, you still need 95% or 99% to have 5%. If all of a sudden everybody becomes competent, everybody becomes smart, and everybody becomes super nice, I think the life on Earth would cease to exist. Maybe that's what happened to dinosaurs. I don't know. Yeah, maybe they were super nice.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, this is an interesting point that you make, and it just reminds me of this pattern. If we look at recent development in software, and I'm talking about, let's say, free software. There's a movement, free software and open source, but also any hacking, right? The way it started, as I remember, is with the intention saying, we will turn scarcity into abundance. We will create this machinery, this internet, that will, all of a sudden, everybody will have abundance, right? Mm-hmm. And indeed, it did happen, right? But look at what they're doing now. Now they're the exact same people are saying, we will create scarcity. We will create blockchain. We will limit abundance. Like, you see, it's completely, everything turns into its absolute opposite. They started with creating abundance, and now they're so big with Web3, whatever they call it, where NFTs and everything is scarce and
And it's just nature of life. The nature of life is change. Yeah. And it's a pendulum, right? The pendulum is swinging, and it's finding a balance in between is where the truth is at. There was this really cool video by Alan Watts where he explains the nature of the yin yang symbol, and he talks that there are fishes, right? So it's white fish, black fish, but white fish has element of the other fish, and he says that if one fish wins, they both die.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same thing here. You know, we just right now we live in a state of history where it's one thing. We are old enough to know where it was before, but for the young people, it will change. Exactly. The change is inevitable.
But quickly, right? I mean,
that's exactly it. The change is becoming more quickly.
It wasn't that long ago when we were excited about 3D printers and all this abundance, right? But now
they're at $20.
Yeah, and also they're clogging the oceans. And we are killing ourselves with that, right? So now we want to go back to scarcity. Just took 2 years.
But they dig this shit from the oceans and they make running shoes from it. So see, it's the pendulum swing.
Yeah, we need to run.
So let's hope it never stops.
But and just one last thing I want to say is people really often disagree with me, but I really think that it is true that the end justifies the means. That
elaborate.
Well, if you have some goal in life or the end, right, then you will choose some means to get there. And when you get there, then potentially somebody may be judging your means, how you got there. But that end will justify the means.
Yeah, and I would look for them, and I kind of like I'm thinking what it might be in examples. I think the reason why the end justified the means, because the end was not the goal was the means. What is actually that you're creating by heading there?
Good point.
There is like just quick 2 examples, and I know when I tell stories it's never quick. One example is I came across this article somewhere, and I'll send it to you. It's in Russian, but I'll send it to you. You can translate it. It talks about this guy who was collecting stamps, postal stamps, and he had all of the stamps from all over the world collected, except for one stamp. And with this one stamp was so rare that that became his almost like a purpose of life to find this stamp. And throughout this life, he was like searching and searching and searching. And all of a sudden, he finds somebody who has that stamp. He finds that person, makes an arrangement, and person, just come and get it. He bought a ticket. I might be, by the way, if I'm sending you the article, I might be changing some facts in this article, but it's kind of like my interpretation of it. And he's in such a anxiety. He's like, oh my God, this is it. This is going to happen. But you know what also is happening at the same time is he's losing his purpose. By getting this stamp, this is it. His life becomes meaningless. And I have experienced that in my life. I had, which started as kind of like, oh, that would be cool to have, to something that was, oh, that would be very nice to have. I'm like, this is a really cool thing, but I think I'll never have it. And then when I saw it so close to me, I was looking for confirmations that I cannot have it. And it actually crashed me when I found a confirmation that I can have it. And then I had it. And I didn't know what to do with it.
No.
And in some way, I actually am now glad that I lost it. Because now I have first of all, the whole experience. And now it teaches me that you can have anything, even if you don't think you can. And it sort of removes the importance of having anything. It's all in this motion. It's all in the ride.
Right. But I was referring to your previous statement where you said you want to be in the 5% or in the 1%.
Oh,
so that's the end. And now you will pick some means to get there. Right? When you get there,
but when then? But then what?
Yeah, but whatever happens then, I don't know.
Okay.
You don't know. But then when you get there, then somebody may look back and look at your means and judge them.
Yeah, that comes with jealousy. That's fine.
And
I agree.
And then some people say, well, that's unacceptable. But I think at that point, you may say the end justifies the means. I did that because I wanted that. Whatever it is.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I think that okay, from that perspective, I think the justification of the means should only be important to the person who reaches it, because you would never be able to argue that because
all I'm saying is for your own, for your own. If you are in doubt and somebody's attacking, oh, Anton, I disagree with this, that, what you did and how you treated me. Okay, you cannot explain, and maybe you don't even want to explain, but in your own mind, you will say, well, the means I did are justifiable because I had this end in mind. Whatever it is, right? And so, but people have big problems when I say that, right? Because now they think you open up for excusing and justifying immoral behavior, blah, blah, blah. But it's up to the person. It's not, right?
Yeah, well, I was just about to say, because they take this model and they play out an example, they don't put themselves
they put Adolf Hitler,
Exactly.
So Hitler had the end to kill all Jews, and the means he justifies his means because of the end.
Well, I think that was the means, actually. The end was actually the prosperity of the certain race, right? The Aryan race. And those were
eliminating others,
and
so his end was to eliminate others, so right. So in his mind, his means are justified, right?
Yeah, but you see, again, people are so scared to accept the possibilities that they will not even put themselves into it. You will never talk to somebody like, you know what? Let's say, in order to have a mansion, you have to create a pyramid scheme, right? Have a mansion, pyramid scheme. They will always put themselves as not a creators of the pyramid schemes, but the one who is being exploited by pyramid schemes. Because people are, they're not valuing themselves. They are trained to look outside of themselves, never inside. And that's why when you are talking about, let's say, management and the subordinates, they always put themselves into the group of the suffering, those who are suffering, rather than the ones that are being, the leaders.
Yeah.
Why it is? Well, maybe we need the mass. Like again, if we had 95% of people were millionaires and had wealthy and all that stuff, and the 5% were middle low class, the civilization would not survive. Yeah. You need this very strong foundation. You need billions and billions of people to suffer, so somebody can actually, because it's a pyramid. I'm actually reading a book, and I'm sorry, I'm speaking over you, trying to add a word. I'm reading this book by this fellow George Gurdjieff, and it's the book is kind of structured as a fairy tale, and within this fairy tale, and just like any fairy tale, there is a story in it, and then there is a fakery in order to bring the message. So in that fairy tale, there is one point that he's making, is that previously, and we don't care how long ago, previously people used to live thousands of years. Now people live barely a century. And that is the reason why we have 8 billion of people rather than 10,000 people. And I see that there is like certain truth in it. Is you need mass in order to advance the civilization.
Yeah.
Otherwise, tribes, African tribes, some Pacific Ocean tribes, they don't thrive because there is a small people.
You're getting into gardening, you told me, and you will see you will need a lot of manure.
Yeah.
To grow a beautiful flower.
That's a really good one. I hope this doesn't go on LinkedIn. But
Well,
yes,
I'm giving you because I was in the garden. I'm in the garden a little bit, so for it you need that foundation, right? But knowing what I know, I would say that this majority of people are always going to be in that position because a lot of people that I meet, they are more interested in satisfying somebody else than their own needs. They think the purpose in life and the success is, how can I please Anton? How can I make Anton even better? And I will even pay out of my own pocket to make you look great. And that will that will make me happy, right? Yeah. And I don't know why that is. I'm not like that. And I assume you're not like that. But I see a lot of people who somehow, how can I make this boss even happier, right?
Yeah. Well, for me, I'm constantly in and out of that. So I'm more out of it these days than in, and it came from the awareness. Rather than fighting one or wanting to become another, I simply became aware where I am today.
Yeah.
Where am I today mentally? Where I am today physically? Where I am, emotionally? And yeah. So, for example, like when you say, I need to do everything to please Anton. Previously, I would probably sort of try it on from the perspective, what is it I am trying to do to please somebody? But now my emotional thoughts, when you say that, I hear it and I'm like, that sounds good. Keep doing it.
Yeah, keep pleasing me.
Keep pleasing me, exactly.
Oh yeah, why would you be against that? But I'm talking about if you now are looking up to someone and say, okay, I want the end justifies the means. I won't spare any effort or any money to somehow please this person, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Queen Elizabeth, maybe the Pope, somebody, Dalai Lama. Somehow I need to please Dalai Lama. What do I have to do to make him happier? Right?
Yeah, and the ultimate tool that humans created to please is God.
Yeah.
Any religion is all about pleasing.
Yeah. But God is just a sublimated Father in heaven.
I think, yeah, it's like if you look at it as a concept rather than what it is, it all of a sudden totally makes sense. First of all, you can't touch it, so you cannot prove that it exists or it doesn't exist, and you can always use that as somewhere in between carrot and a stick.
Yeah, and he has two mood. He has two mood states: rage and suppressed rage, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we're lucky we go through suppressed rage.
Yeah,
like
but yeah,
rage and suppressed rage. Okay, I think we should go back and read and think over what we said here, and then it's gonna, from this manure that we create, is gonna, maybe a flower will grow.
But even if nothing comes out, the means itself smells amazing.
It smells, right?
Yeah. No, thanks, Alex, I really appreciate this talk. I'm glad, as I told you, I'm very flexible. I think I had 3 things to do today. One is to make pasta. Other is to hang some drapery. And the third, I need to take pictures at a different time of the day because I'm picking color for my front door. So nothing crazy, just
beautiful. That's beautiful.
Thanks.
I like that. I think that's great. So let's think about the bullshit we talked about here. And let's hope there's a spark, or like a new insight.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's get together again and push it further. That would be my ambition. The end justifies the means. The end is to have a breakthrough. Okay.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Anton. And